I've always believed that small towns like Willow Creek breathe secrets through their cracked sidewalks. I'm Samantha Reed, 30 years old, local journalist, and the self-proclaimed guardian of the truth. My mornings start with the hiss of the old espresso machine at Maggie's Diner, and the comforting chatter of people who still know each other's middle names. Life here isn't glamorous, but it's steady. Until the day a man in an expensive navy suit walked into our newsroom like he owned it. His name was Ryan Caldwell, corporate PR head for the powerful Garrison Group. His arrival wasn't casual, it was damage control. The company he represented had been accused of buying out a beloved community bookstore under shady circumstances, and I'd been the one writing the exposés. The moment our eyes locked, I knew he'd dismissed me before I even opened my mouth. His polished shoes and perfect tie screamed big city arrogance. "Miss Reed," he said, smooth as polished marble, "your latest piece borders on sensationalism. Let's discuss facts before you ruin a reputation." The nerve. Facts? I checked every source twice. Maybe your company should try honesty instead of PR spin. My voice echoed off the thin newsroom walls. He smirked, as if my words were an amusing footnote in his schedule. Honesty is subjective, especially in small-town gossip columns. That was it. Fire lit under my skin. Nobody called my work gossip. But beneath the irritation, there was a spark I didn't want to admit. A quick, unwanted flicker of attraction that only made me angrier. As he left, promising to clarify things later, Maggie whispered behind the counter, "He's handsome trouble, Sam. Watch your heart." I brushed her off, but my heartbeat betrayed me. Something told me Ryan Caldwell was about to turn my steady life into a storm. The next morning, I walked into Willow Creek's town hall, notebook in hand, expecting another routine council meeting. Instead, I found Ryan Caldwell, leaning casually against the bulletin board, his phone pressed to his ear. The sight of his expensive suit against our faded yellow walls felt like a splash of oil on water. It didn't belong, and yet it drew every eye. He ended his call, looked up, and smirked like he'd been expecting me. "Miss Reed," he said, his voice maddeningly calm. "I hear you're attending the bookstore redevelopment hearing. Garrison Group wants transparency, so I'll be sitting in." Transparency or damage control? I shot back, scribbling the date on my notepad. His grin widened. Sometimes they're the same thing. The meeting was chaos. Angry townsfolk, flustered council members, and the mayor trying to keep order. When accusations started flying about forged permits and missing funds, Ryan raised a hand. "Let's stick to verifiable information," he said, his tone authoritative enough to silence the room. Then, to my horror, Mayor Blake cleared his throat and said, "Given the public's concern, I'm appointing 2 independent investigators, Samantha Reed, representing the press, and Ryan Caldwell, representing Garrison Group. You'll work together to verify these claims." I nearly dropped my pen. "Work with him?" I whispered under my breath. Ryan's eyes gleamed with something between mischief and challenge. "Looks like we're partners, Miss Reed." After the meeting, I cornered him outside beneath the oak trees that lined Main Street. "This is ridiculous. You and I don't see eye to eye on anything." He leaned closer, his cologne annoyingly pleasant. "True. But maybe the truth needs 2 pairs of eyes." The wind caught my hair, and for a split second, I caught a flicker of sincerity behind his smug expression. I hated that it made my stomach flutter. As he walked away, whistling like he'd already won, I couldn't shake the feeling that this partnership would be far messier and far more personal than either of us expected. I told myself that working with Ryan Caldwell would be purely professional, but by day 2, that illusion had already cracked. We met outside the shuttered bookstore, its faded sign, Willow Creek Reads, still clinging to the brick facade like a memory refusing to let go. Ryan arrived exactly on time, wearing rolled-up sleeves this time instead of his perfect suit jacket. It should have made him look less intimidating, but somehow, the casual look made him even more infuriatingly attractive. "Ready to start?" he asked, flashing that confident grin. "Depends," I said, flipping open my notebook. "Are you planning to spin everything we find, or will you actually look for the truth?" His chuckle was low and warm, and it annoyed me how good it sounded. "You might be surprised, Miss Reed. Not every corporate man is a villain." We slipped through the creaking door, the bookstore's dusty shelves looming like quiet witnesses. I remembered afternoons spent here as a teenager, lost among novels that smelled of paper and ink. Now the place felt abandoned, almost violated. Ryan sifted through old invoices on the counter, while I snapped photos of the lease documents pinned to the back office wall. That's when I found it, a letter dated 2 months ago, warning the previous owner about sudden zoning changes. The signature? A Garrison Group executive. "Ryan," I said, holding up the letter. "Care to explain this?" He took it, brows furrowing. "I've never seen this before. If this is real, someone in my company broke serious rules." For a moment, the charm slipped, replaced by something raw and unsettled. We spent the afternoon cataloging evidence, our conversation oddly civil as we pieced together timelines. Still, every time our fingers brushed while handling papers, a jolt of awareness shot through me. As the sun dipped low, Ryan locked up the store and handed me a duplicate key. "Partners, remember?" he said softly. Walking back to my car, I caught my reflection in the bookstore's dusty window. Cheeks flushed, eyes brighter than they'd been in years. I hated to admit it, but part of me was starting to trust him, and that was dangerous. The next evening, Ryan suggested we review our notes over coffee at Willow Creek's only late-night cafe, The Lantern. I almost said no. Spending more time with him felt risky, but the evidence was piling up, and I needed clarity. The cafe's golden lights cast a warm glow as we settled into a corner booth. I spread our documents across the table, determined to stay focused. But as Ryan rolled up his sleeves and leaned over the papers, I noticed a faint scar on his forearm. My curiosity betrayed me. "What happened there?" I asked, pointing. He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Fell off my dad's fishing boat when I was 12. Tried to act tough, but I cried for an hour. Guess I've always been stubborn." It was a small detail, but it cracked his polished exterior. For the first time, I saw him as more than the smug PR guy. We pored over the documents for hours, tracing signatures and timelines. Somewhere between zoning maps and permit copies, our hands brushed again. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. My heart thudded in my chest, loud enough that I worried he could hear. When the clock struck 10, Ryan leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You know," he said softly, "you're good at this. You care about people in a way that's rare." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. "Don't flatter me, Caldwell," I teased, though my cheeks warmed. Outside, the night air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine. We walked to our cars under a sky full of stars. For a moment, the world felt small and intimate, like the universe had shrunk to just the two of us. At my car door, he paused. "Sam," he began, then shook his head. "Never mind. Good night." As he drove off, I leaned against my car, breathless. I told myself it was just professional tension, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. By the time Friday rolled around, I was half convinced the whole town was whispering about Ryan and me. Willow Creek wasn't big enough to keep secrets, especially ones that walked side by side through Main Street carrying stacks of zoning documents. That morning, we headed to the county records office, a dimly lit building that smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. Ryan held the door for me, and when our eyes met, there was a flicker of warmth that neither of us commented on. Inside, we combed through decades of property files. Halfway through, I found an odd discrepancy. A land survey dated months before any official announcement. It hinted that someone had inside information about the bookstore's sale. "Ryan, look at this," I said, sliding the paper toward him. His brow furrowed as he scanned it. "This doesn't make sense. This survey was commissioned before the deal was even public." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Someone's playing dirty, Sam. And it might not just be a rogue employee. This could go higher." The seriousness in his voice startled me. For the first time, I saw the strain behind his polished demeanor. He wasn't just protecting a company, he was wrestling with loyalty and integrity. During lunch at a food truck outside the records office, I caught him staring at the ground, lost in thought. "You okay?" I asked, softer than I meant to. He sighed. "I joined Garrison Group because I thought we did things differently. If what we're finding is true, I've been defending people who don't deserve it." I wanted to comfort him, but I also needed to stay objective. "We follow the facts, Ryan, no matter where they lead." His eyes met mine, gratitude flickering there. For a moment, the world around us, the hum of traffic, the distant bark of a dog, faded away. As we packed up for the day, I realized my feelings were shifting faster than I could control. Ryan Caldwell was no longer just the enemy. He was becoming someone whose disappointment hurt me, and whose approval I craved. Saturday brought a storm that rattled every window in Willow Creek. The wind howled through the pines, and rain hammered the sidewalks like impatient fingers. I was at my kitchen table sorting through the evidence we'd gathered when my phone buzzed. Ryan. "Sam, I need you at the old bookstore now," he said, his voice tense. I grabbed my raincoat and hurried out, heart thudding. The sky was a bruised purple as I splashed through puddles toward the boarded-up shop. Ryan stood outside, drenched, clutching a folder. His usually perfect hair was plastered to his forehead, and for once, he looked vulnerable. "Found something in the company archives," he said, thrusting the folder at me. Inside were signed approvals showing the zoning changes had been pushed through by Garrison Group's vice president, weeks before the council even voted. "This is the smoking gun," I whispered, anger mixing with excitement. Ryan's jaw tightened. "I have to leak this to the press, but that means going against my own boss. It could destroy my career." The storm grew louder, thunder cracking above us. I stepped closer, rain soaking through my coat. "Ryan, if you stay silent, this whole town loses. And you'll lose yourself." His eyes searched mine, and for a heartbeat, the world held still. The storm, the rain, the scandal, all of it faded. All I could feel was the electricity between us. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from my cheek. "Why do you care what happens to me?" he asked quietly. I swallowed hard. "Because somewhere between fighting you and trusting you, I started liking you." The confession hung between us, fragile and terrifying. Ryan let out a shaky breath. "Sam," he began, but lightning split the sky, and the moment was swallowed by the storm. We stood there, drenched and breathless, knowing everything had changed, yet nothing was resolved. The storm finally broke overnight, leaving Willow Creek washed clean and smelling of pine. By morning, the sky was an endless blue, but my mind was anything but clear. I kept replaying last night, Ryan's wet hair, his trembling voice, the way my own heart betrayed me. When I reached the newsroom, Maggie was already there, her coffee steaming. She raised an eyebrow. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," I admitted, dropping my bag. "We found proof, and things got complicated." Her grin was knowing. "Complicated like your heartbeat skips when he's around?" I didn't answer. Instead, I turned on my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor. Publishing the evidence would expose the Garrison Group's vice president, but Ryan's career would take a hit too. Around noon, Ryan appeared in the doorway, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He closed the door behind him. "I leaked the documents," he said quietly. "Anonymous tip. By tonight, the world will know." I blinked. "Ryan, your job..." He shrugged, though his jaw was tight. "Some things are worth more than a paycheck." There was a pause, heavy and unspoken. Then he stepped closer. "Sam, about what you said last night, about liking me." His voice cracked just enough to betray nerves. "I like you too. I think I've liked you since the moment you called me out in that newsroom." The air between us seemed to hum. I felt like the room had shrunk, like the world outside no longer mattered. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an alert. "Breaking news. Garrison Group scandal uncovered." My editor was shouting from the hallway for me to start drafting a follow-up. Reality crashed back in. Ryan gave me a small, almost sad smile. "We'll talk later," he murmured. As he left, I touched my lips, my heart thudding against my ribs. For the first time in years, I felt the dangerous thrill of falling, of risking everything for something that might just be worth it. By Monday morning, Willow Creek was buzzing like a kicked beehive. The Garrison Group scandal dominated every headline, and my editor practically danced with excitement at my desk. But beneath the town's vindicated cheers, I felt the weight of what Ryan had sacrificed. I found him sitting alone at the Lantern Cafe, nursing a black coffee like it was a lifeline. The usual confidence in his posture was gone. His shoulders slumped, his tie loosened, and his eyes clouded with exhaustion. "Hey," I said softly, sliding into the booth across from him. He looked up and managed a half smile. "Hey, small-town hero." I winced. "Don't. You're the one who risked everything." He took a long sip of coffee. "My boss called this morning. I'm officially on indefinite leave," which is corporate for pack your desk. He tried to laugh, but the sound cracked. Guilt twisted in my chest. "Ryan, Don't," he interrupted gently. "I made my choice, and I'd do it again." For a while we just sat there, the cafe's chatter muffled by the heavy silence between us. Finally, I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. His fingers tightened around mine instantly, like he'd been waiting for me to do it. "This isn't over," I said. "Not for you. Someone will see what kind of man you are and hire you in a heartbeat." His eyes searched mine, vulnerable in a way that undid me. "And what about us?" he asked quietly. The question startled me. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed with another notification. "Breaking update. Town council resigns amid scandal fallout." The story wasn't finished yet, and neither were we. I squeezed his hand. "Let's survive the fallout first. Then, we'll figure out us." As I left the cafe, I caught my reflection in the window, eyes bright, cheeks flushed. Somewhere deep down, I already knew what I wanted that answer to be. 2 weeks after the scandal broke, Willow Creek was finally starting to breathe again. The corrupt council members had resigned, the bookstore's deed was returned to the community, and locals were already planning a fundraiser to restore it. I covered every step for the paper, but secretly I watched for glimpses of Ryan. He'd stayed in town, renting a small apartment above Maggie's diner. Some nights I'd spot him on Main Street, sleeves rolled, talking with townsfolk who once saw him as the enemy. He didn't walk like a corporate man anymore. He walked like someone who belonged. One evening, Maggie cornered me at the counter. "You're glowing every time he's around," she teased, sliding me a slice of pie. I tried to deny it, but my reflection in the diner's window betrayed me. Cheeks pink, eyes too bright. I wasn't just reporting on a story anymore. I was living one. Later, I found Ryan at the bookstore, sweeping sawdust from the floor. The place smelled of fresh wood and new beginnings. He glanced up, surprise flickering in his blue eyes. "Didn't expect company," he said. I stepped inside, brushing dust off a nearby shelf. "Thought you might need help." He leaned on the broom, studying me. "Sam, I've been thinking. Once the bookstore reopens, I might stay. Start something here. Maybe PR for small businesses. Maybe something completely different. I don't know yet." My heart thudded. Willow Creek could use someone like you. He took a cautious step toward me. "And I could use someone like you." The silence between us stretched, warm and promising. For weeks I'd been tiptoeing around my feelings, but here, in this half-renovated bookstore, it felt simple. "I don't want to fight you anymore," I whispered. His smile was small but certain. "Then don't." As he reached for my hand, I felt the weight of the past weeks lift, the lies, the anger, the storm. All that remained was possibility. The grand reopening of Willow Creek Reads felt like the whole town's heart was beating under one roof. Twinkling string lights framed the bookstore's entrance, and laughter spilled onto Main Street. The once abandoned shop now glowed with fresh paint, polished shelves, and the promise of new stories. I stood near the entrance, my press badge clipped to my jacket, pretending to take notes but mostly scanning the crowd for him. And then there he was, Ryan, in a simple button-down and rolled sleeves, looking nothing like the polished PR executive who'd first stormed into my newsroom. He was smiling, genuinely, as he handed a donated book to a child clutching their mother's hand. When his eyes found mine across the room, it felt like the world quieted. He crossed the floor in a few long strides, stopping just close enough for his presence to feel electric. "Miss Reed," he said, voice teasing but soft. "Care to give me one last scathing interview?" I laughed. "Not tonight. Tonight I'm off duty." He studied me for a moment, then held out his hand. "Then maybe you'll dance with me instead." There wasn't any music, just the murmur of townsfolk and the creak of old wooden floors. But when I slipped my hand into his, he pulled me closer, and we swayed anyway, our own quiet rhythm threading through the chaos. As we moved, I thought about the first time we'd clashed, how sure I'd been that he was nothing but trouble, yet here we were, trouble and all, finding something worth holding on to. He bent his head, whispering against my hair. "You turned my world upside down, Sam Reed." I smiled against his chest. "You needed it." The bookstore around us blurred. The laughter, the lights, the smell of fresh paper and ink. In that small-town bookstore, under strings of borrowed lights, the rival I'd once despised had become the man I didn't want to live without. For the first time in years, Willow Creek felt like more than home. It felt like a beginning. And Ryan Caldwell felt like forever.